Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I just wanted to take a moment, having finished the campaign for Last Epoch for the first time, to kind of go back and do an end of campaign review. Typically when I play games like this, I like to get all the way through the campaign and then do a review at the end of the main storyline, so that way I can have my opinion for what the game was as a going through the story, and then later on I'll do a review for the end game loop that I just started now. So far the end game is actually kind of fun so far, so we'll see how that goes. But I wanted to start talking about the Last Epoch campaign slash early game slash whatever it is that you want to call it, and go over the good and the bad so far that I've experienced, just so I can kind of cap off my experience of the campaign with letting you guys know what's going on. So I want to start off with the good. First and foremost, the game is just fun. I spent, I don't know, I had an 8.5 hour live stream, a 6 hour live stream, and I just finished up a a little over 2 hour live stream, I think. So, you know, it took us a good, 15 plus hours, I think. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, a little over 15, 16 hours, something like that, to get through the campaign in our first go through, compared to Path of Exile, which, you're going to spend 16 to 20 hours, even if you're optimizing your time. To me, that's pretty reasonable compared to the grind that is Path of Exile. So there's that. But it's just a lot of fun. I didn't mind going through and, doing the story, because the story in this game is just really amazing. The story engaged me enough that I didn't mind the amount of time that it took. And realistically, most of the time that I spent, the 16 hours I spent, was because I sat and listened to the story. I was paying attention to the story. If you just blast through it, skipping through all the content and all of that stuff, you could probably get it done in, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours maybe, if you just sat down and just ground it out for an evening. Took a day and just got it done. You could probably get from level 1 all the way up to in-game maps in an evening, if you really just was efficient with your time and was just blasting through it as much as you could. As you can see from where we are right now, the scenes and the graphics are just amazing. Everywhere I go, it's just very visually stimulating in a way that is, I personally prefer the kind of fantastical setting that this game provides. Path of Exile is visually appealing. It's very nice to look at, but it's a much darker game, and that's not really I've never been super interested in dark and gritty and all of that kind of stuff. I really like the magical, fantastical looking world that this game provides, and apparently because they've redone the graphics recently, we're getting this view instead of whatever it was before. So I'm kind of glad I missed out on the old view. That way I don't have the old view tainting my view of what it is now. I just think it's really nice and pretty. I feel like the combat in this game is really fluid, and you are able to set things up in a way that allows you to fight the way that you want to fight. I like the fact that you can actually build your own character, and you can build it in a way that doesn't require you to have a build guide by somebody who went through and did crazy amounts of theory crafting to provide you with something. One of my biggest gripes with Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 both is that they talk about, infinite diversity, be able to build your character however you want, but the reality is that because they've tuned the game so hard, you don't really have the freedom to build whatever kind of build you want. You're railroaded into the builds that they kind of had in the back of their head when they put the skill tree together and when they made the difficulties of the monsters. In this game, the monsters are easy enough that you can just put a build together, and as long as you have half a brain and you're kind of trying to line things up in a way that fits an archetype that you've decided that you want to play, the skills mesh well together enough that you're able to get reasonable results out of your stuff. This character right here, I just kind of went through and chose abilities that I wanted. I wanted a melee ability that could go in and just slash things down really fast, and then I wanted a ranged ability that could hit things hard from really far away, so that way if I couldn't be close, I was able to do that. And then I wanted a big AoE ability that was able to just kind of run around slicing things, and then the blades for this actually kind of chain out to other enemies as you're fighting, which is really cool. So, And then I have the smoke bomb here and the lethal mirage. This is kind of like a get up close and then slash them to death kind of thing. This gives us some haste and some dodge ability and things like that. But these are all things that I chose myself because it fits the kind of play style that I want for this particular character. I decided that I wanted to play an archetypical poison slash bleed rogue kind of thing. A lot of the stuff in here was kind of like it wasn't necessarily where you're going to hyper focus on poison, because there was a lot of abilities where you could go down the bleed side of it as well, and you didn't have to just focus on one. You could poison and bleed at the same time and stack those abilities together, which is really nice. I like that the trees available to us are complicated enough to provide you with real choice, right? But not so complicated that making a mistake that it's easy to make mistakes because you don't really know what this node is going to do to another node or how you need to combine nodes together. No, you just go from left to right across, and as you're going, you just kind of decide which abilities you want. It reminds me a lot of the World of Warcraft skill tree back before they did you only get 3 options. Like they actually give you options on the screen here, and you're able to just kind of go through and figure out what you want, and you just pick abilities that go with the image you have in your head of how you want the character to play, and then it just does it. And I'm a big fan of this because it makes it so that you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours playing with some tool to try to figure out, if I do this, will it do this? Will it do this? Will it do this? No, it's just like, no, I'm playing a character that I want to be fast and nimble and do poison and bleed damage and have high critical hits and things like that. So let me just pick things on the tree that do that. I'm a big fan of the way that the skill tree works in this game because it allows you, it doesn't give you an illusion of choice. It gives you actual choices. It lays those choices out for you, and then you just pick which ones you want. It's like a buffet. You just decide, there's a prepared thing for me here. Let me add these things to my plate, and I decide what I want. That's the way you do character builds. You don't do infinite character trees where, you put the wrong combination of things together, and then you're just totally screwed. I don't like that. That's one of the things about Path of Exile that it sounds like a great idea in theory, but in practice, you end up having to wait for somebody who knows better to put a build together for you. So I'm a big fan of the idea that you can actually build your own character and just make it how you want it to be. Another thing I really like in the game is the fact that a lot of times quest objectives are not only marked on the map, but they're marked on the map once you get within a pretty far distance. And on some of them, it's marked as soon as you go on the map. So you're not having to spend ridiculous amounts of time trying to explore every square inch of every map you go into, trying to find whatever it is that you're trying to do. The game just kind of guides you through the process, which is really, really nice. I do not like having to waste my time going to one corner of the map only to find out, oh, there's nothing there. Let me run back to the other side. I like that the quest objectives are marked and they give you the direction that you need to go. That's really, really nice. I've also found, at least in my personal experience, that the zone exits tend to follow the direction that the exit that you're going to is on the map. So if the map zone that you're going to is to the north, well, you're going to go up to get to that direction, which is really nice because it makes it so that if you have a specific place you're trying to get to, you don't think, oh, well, do I need to go to the right or do I need to go to the left or do I actually have to go down in what feels like the opposite direction? No, you just go towards the direction of where you think you're supposed to go. And most of the time, the quest objective will actually tell you where you're supposed to go. But even if you don't, if you think you have to be going to a place that's in the north, you just head north and that's generally where you're going to be going. I feel like the item drops throughout the campaign were pretty solid. I didn't really get to the point where I had to craft anything until at the very, very end of the campaign. So the items that drop keep you powerful enough that you're able to get things done in a way that doesn't require you to have to sit and stop and craft all the time, which is really nice. I like that the items that just fall on the ground for the most part are able to keep you solidly going through the campaign continuously without having to stop. It's really, really nice. I also feel that the monster XP that you get from fighting things, just fighting through the campaign, you get through a level and you're basically keeping pace with the level of the maps, which makes it really, really nice. So that you're not constantly having to worry about, oh, am I going to end up under leveled in this space, or am I going to be this or that? And I also really appreciate the fact that they have the speed leveling aspect in mind, so you don't have to do all the little side quests to keep up with the leveling process. I have several alts, and I basically just did the main storyline quests, and all of those guys are pretty much at the level that the zones were. So all of the side quests are more or less optional, except for, obviously you have to go through and get some of the side quests to get all of your passive points that are available to you. But outside of that, more or less you can just do all of the main quests and your level is going to stay right there. I also feel like that for the most part, I put an ish here, I put an ish at the end of my statement in my little notes here. For the most part, the boss fights are just the right challenge level when you come across them. I like boss fights that require you to put a little bit more time and effort into them, require you to pay a little bit more attention than just running through the maps and killing mobs and rares and stuff like that. But I don't like boss fights that require you to have to memorize a process. If I'm having to stop and fight a boss 3 or 4 times because the mechanics are difficult, that doesn't feel like a hero's journey to me. That feels like a grindy job that I don't want to do. And I'm a big fan of the way they approach boss fights in this game, with 2 exceptions that we'll talk about when the bad section, which is coming up next. My bad section for this game is really, really small. It's really, really small. I have a few things that are all kind of, the first 3 items are kind of all control related, and then the other 2 things are just things I'd like to see changed, and one of them kind of irritated me a lot. So the WASD controls in this game are actually pretty good. I had a weird bug in the beginning that was causing me to like freeze in place, and I basically just don't use the left mouse button for anything because that seems to be what's causing the problem. I don't know why. I really hope that they fix it. I really would like for them to make it so that the left mouse button is decoupled from movement completely, so that you're able to assign an ability to your left mouse button, because I'm the kind of person who I like to have it set up so that my left mouse button is my melee attack and my right mouse button is some kind of ranged attack, and then I have my 2 thumb buttons for other quick action things that I want, and then I use the keyboard for other stuff because I want my keyboard to be for just moving around. And the way it is now, because I can't use my left mouse button, I end up having to put other things on keyboard actions that I would prefer to not have to, and it kind of is what it is. So it has a couple of bugs that need to be fixed, and it also needs to be set up in a way to where it works. That is one of the things that I would like it to be more like Path of Exile 2, in that you move with your keyboard and then you target and activate abilities with your mouse. That's the way I would prefer it to be. I also would like it if they had a setting that disabled the automatic controller swapping, just a drop-down menu that gave you the option to turn that off, because I have several peripherals that I plug in for other things like Elite Dangerous and my flight simulator and stuff, and if I happen to press I rest my foot on my rudder pedals, and if I happen to move my rudder pedals or accidentally press the pedal, it automatically tries to switch over to controller mode, and then for whatever reason there's a bug that wouldn't let me switch back. Like you have to use the controller to switch back to the keyboard, mouse and keyboard mode, so it'll automatically switch to the keyboard, the controller mode, but then using your mouse and keyboard doesn't automatically switch it back to mouse and keyboard. So they either need to make it so that, you know, it automatically switches consistently between the 2, or you just have the option to disable controllers completely, so that way I don't have to unplug my stuff every time I play the game. I can just play the game and I don't have to worry about it. I don't know how I feel about the respecking scheme in the game. I guess I get it. When I first was looking at the respecking of abilities, I'm talking about abilities specifically. Your respecking of your passive points, I mean, you don't lose any points with that. You get passive points, you respec them, you can do it back and forth. When you want to swap out an ability, I feel like there's a little bit, I don't like the punishment aspect of it. Mostly because, you know, especially if you're being encouraged to create your own builds and you want to try out different things, I don't really want to be penalized by losing points and then having to wait for that ability to gain enough experience points to be able to dump enough points in it for it to be viable with my other skills again. So I understand the idea that, you know, changing your mind should have a cost to it, but at the same time, I don't agree with that, because if you want to try out different things, if you want to find another ability that might mesh well with the other things that you've chosen, forcing us to have to start with that ability not being good enough and I have to wait to find out if it's going to mesh well doesn't really help me very much. So I don't really think I agree with the way that respecking your abilities works in the game. I understand the philosophy that people have that it should have a cost so that you're not just arbitrarily switching it all the time. I don't really agree with that idea. I don't understand what the problem is with the idea of just constantly switching your abilities out to try new things. I've never understood that argument. It makes no sense to me, other than an arbitrary desire for actions to have consequences, and I don't understand that either in a video game anyway. Like in life, obviously, You know, you do things and there's a consequence to your actions. In a video game, if I want to swap out my abilities, I should be able to just swap out my abilities so I can try different combinations of things to find out what works the best. And I don't want to have to wait forever for those abilities to level up to be on par with what I already have to find out if it actually will, in fact, do what I want it to do. So I get that they tried to mitigate that somewhat with the minimum skill level, but at the same time, it's like, why? Just let me swap out the ability, put a bunch of points into things, and see if I can find something that works. I'm not a big fan of that. And then the last thing I want to point out as a negative is the last major irritating thing that I had to do. The Lagan and Majasa fight. Oh, I don't know. The Lagan fight was hard. My issue with the Lagan and the Majasa fights are that compared to everything else in the campaign up to the point that you get to them, the difficulty spikes for those two bosses are just way, way, way too high. You're basically able to steamroll through everything in the campaign, and then you get to these two bosses, and all of a sudden all of your progress stops, and that's really frustrating. It's really annoying. If the entire game was like Path of Exile 2 and the idea was you're supposed to be challenged the whole way, then these bosses wouldn't stand out at all. But because they do stand out, and let me be clear, I have said multiple times that I think it's a good idea to have contrast, right? So I'm not saying that they just need to be like pushover bosses that you don't have to do anything at all like the other bosses. Like, they should be difficult fights, but I feel like the level of difficulty, especially in the Majasa fight, where there's just way too much going on all at once, and some of the abilities, some of the things that she's able to do make it really difficult to avoid getting hit by her, and she hits really hard, and if you haven't set your character up to be able to deal with that, you're just totally screwed. I had to basically max out the crafting on all of my gear to get through, to just barely scrape through the Majasa fight. So it isn't that I think that the fights should be easy, nor do I, and I also don't think they should just like be medium difficulty. I think they should be difficult fights, but I think that there's just, it's too much, too much harder than everything else around it, and you're not ready for it when it happens. So either have some kind of a ramp up that happens so that you can be ready for that fight when it comes, or pull back on those bosses a little bit so that it's not just this massive wall that you smash your face into once you get to it. I feel like it's the difference in everything around it. You go like this, and then all of a sudden there's Lagan, and then the difficulty drops back down to where you were, and you go all the way through to the end of the game, and you get to Majasa, and then again it jumps way high. And you know, if you aren't savvy enough to realize that, oh, my DPS isn't there, or my health isn't there, or my resistances aren't there, or whatever, because up through that point in the game, you haven't had a reason to think about them. The gear that dropped was just able to sustain you enough to where you never really had much of a danger of dying in the first place. And then you get to these two fights, and all of a sudden they're just beating the crap out of you. So, especially for newer players who aren't necessarily familiar with how ARPGs work, I think pulling back on those, because it's just a campaign anyways. The whole point of the campaign is just the first time you go through it, you want to experience the story, and then every other time you go through it, you're just trying to hurry up and get through leveling so you can get to the end game, whatever the new version of the end game is. So I don't know that those fights need to be super difficult. I don't really feel like they need to be. I think they need to be the most difficult fights in the campaign, sure. I don't know that they need to be as difficult as they are, because it is a massive difference between all of the other bosses you fight versus these two specific bosses, and I think it should be tuned down a little bit. Or adjust the rest of the game so that players are forced to figure out all of that stuff before they get to these ultra hard fights, and then they're ready for it. They have the gear for it. So that's my thought on that. But anyways, overall, I'm having way more fun in this game than I ever did in either of the Path of Exile games, because, you know, I play video games to have fun, not to have another job that I have to grind through. And this game doesn't make me feel like I'm grinding through it. It makes me feel like, hey, you're welcome to come on, have some fun, kill some monsters, grab some loot, upgrade your character a little bit, and then, yeah, when you're done, you can be done and go back to your life. It doesn't feel like if you want to get anything done in this game that you have to grind forever trying to get the currency you need and this and that and that. It feels like they went for maximum fun, and difficulty and realism isn't necessarily the goal, and I like that. I like that that's the way that they went with the game. So hopefully that helps some of you who are either new to the game like me, or even older people who have been playing this game for a while and just want to see what the new people are thinking about the game. If you're thinking about picking up Last Epoch, I absolutely highly recommend grabbing the game if you are remotely interested in ARPGs. The story is really good, the gameplay is fun, the combat is fun. There's plenty of loot that drops, and you don't have loot deserts like you do in some other games I could mention. And yeah, so that's all I got to say about that. Hopefully this review helped you. I will do another review later on when I get pretty deep into the end game content, so I can talk about that and you can get my perspective on that. So thank you very much. Hit the like button, subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers, join as a member for early access to videos among other perks, or you can just leave YouTube's version of a tip with that thanks button. I also have PayPal and Patreon links in the description if you prefer to go that route, because some people do like to support channels outside of the YouTube economy. So again, thanks for watching. Be sure to come back for our next video, and I'll see you then.